Sarah, thank you very much for coming here today to talk a bit about currency and the best strategies to work the best out of buying from a different country with a different currency, and a bit of the current scenario that curiously you predicted on our webinar back in December, the one that was hacked by, not hacked, but invaded by trolls. But I fully remember you talking about this tendency that when Trump got elected, the dollar went down, but then a few months in, it started plummeting. And that's exactly what's happening right now, isn't it?
Yes, I feel like I had a crystal ball, it seemed. It's obviously we look at sort of historic data, trends, things that have how it's sort of happened before. There's obviously data that we're looking at. The challenge is that we talk a lot about what could happen with potential volatility. And I understand it's difficult because if it's not happening at that precise moment, people don't feel it necessarily relates to them because, oh, I don't need to move money right now. So therefore, this is not relevant to me. But the reality is that a lot of, your customers, my customers, they're buying property in Portugal. So you're paying in euros and you've got US dollars, you've got Canadian dollars, you've got pounds, or you're moving to Portugal. So at some point you will need euros as part of your journey and actually coming to live in Portugal. So you will need them at some point. Now, the challenge then becomes, okay, I don't need them right now, but in say 6 months, 12 months time, or depending on your time frames, I need that money now. What's happening with the exchange rate? You've got very little choice. You just have to take it, whatever it is at that time. And if it's not as good as it was when you first started your journey, there's not a lot you can really do about that.
And probably a lot of money because in these things, and especially when you're talking about buying a house, even if it's on the lower end, let's talk about 200,000, which we considered a fairly low valued property. When the currency changes like 10 or 20% against you, that's a lot of money you are losing. Like in
Absolutely.
20,000, that's in 200,000, 10% is 20,000 euros.
Exactly. Exactly. And as I said, it's not to sort of put people off and be like, well, don't come, don't buy. It's not that. It's just how can we manage that for people and just get them thinking about it rather than leaving to the last minute. I mean, if we look at sort of in the last week or so, we've seen a 4% difference, which is, if you're selling US dollars and buying euros on 250,000, that's about 11,000 US dollars. So the challenge is that someone that's buying a house might have budgeted to buy a car as well, and all of a sudden now all that money's towards the house and there's sort of no car and things like that. So it's about actually looking at it in advance so that we can try and help you budget. And
Yeah,
really
and
what
I
we've
think
seen
most
is,
people don't consider that it's possible to actually secure a rate in advance. So do you explain how that works with Spartan?
yeah, so there's a few different options. So one option is that you can buy euros in advance and we can hold them on account for you, because some people will say, well, I don't have a Portuguese bank account yet. It's not open. I haven't got a destination, a beneficiary for a house yet, or like a lawyer or the seller. How can I buy my euros because I've got nowhere to put them? So we can hold euros in advance. Sometimes clients are doing a quarter of what they need or a half, and maybe as a way of sort of doing a bit over time to try and spread the risk a little bit. The other option we have as well is that we have a facility where today you could fix the rate for a future date. So especially when you're buying property and you're given a completion date that's in the future, you can secure the rate today. We only need 10% deposit. It's not a cost or a charge. It secures the rate, and then you pay the remaining 90% when you need the money. The benefit then is, as I said, you're locking into the rate. It could be favorable, or it's a case of it's protecting you because the rate will move in the future. Nobody knows. Could go for or against you, but it's all about budgeting and making sure you know exactly what it's going to cost. But it means that 90% you can hold in your high interest earning accounts in America, for example. You don't have to give us all your money. It's a way of securing the rate. Or maybe the money's not available. Maybe you're waiting for your house to sell in the US, for example. but you're completing, but you know the time frame. So again, it just gives a bit of flexibility that you can be securing the rate in advance of anything you need to do.
And in that case, let's imagine that you secure a rate now, but the dollar ends up recovering. In that case, do you end up missing out?
Yes, I mean, you are locked into the rate, or you have already bought your euros. I think the way to look at it is it depends on everybody's situation. So for some people, they won't want to wait, which is fine. We can help them monitor the rate. Others want that peace of mind. Again, it's sort of the reality of how much is too expensive. For example, if you've got, as I said, a set budget for a property, and if it does become more expensive, as we said, by 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 euros more expensive, is that then still affordable for you? So again, it really depends on your situation, what money you've got available, what your timeframes are. So it's about sort of having those conversations and seeing what the best options are for you.
I think it's also about making an informed risk, basically taking an informed risk, because when you look, and if generally I would, at least the way I would approach that is that I would look at the market and see the ups and downs. And of course, it's not infallible, but generally you can see when there's a rising or a lowing tendency, and you what are the highest rate and the lowest rate. And of course, it will be more advantageous to secure a rate when it's closer to the historic higher rates. So that is, of course, a good strategy. But in this current climate, do you think, in your opinion, that the rates will keep going down? Because Trump is doing a lot of things and making a lot of enemies economically. So honestly, I don't think that things are looking too well for the US dollar, to be honest. I would love to hear your opinion on it.
Well, I think that as we've sort of seen, the challenge is obviously this tariff trade war, and it is all about bargaining power and who has, yes, he said, I'm going to put tariffs on certain goods. Then obviously others have now gone back and counteracted that. But what is the pain of that? Isn't as far as somebody else puts a tariff, actually, will that be worse for the US than the tariff that they've put? Canada talks about cutting off electricity to certain states in the US. Will that hurt them more? If they stop buying, Canada was like, we stop buying certain goods from America. How will that impact Americans and the American economy as well? So it's really looking at that. And I think the challenge really at the moment is that obviously tariffs will make it more expensive for consumers, obviously in the US. And there is concerns, obviously, for the US economy. I mean, Trump's general rhetoric is that he wants to make America good again. He wants to make it a stronger economy. He wants to produce more. He wants to sell more American goods. And it's a good, idea. But how long does it take to get there? Because he does, people are sort of calling him out. Yes, it will be painful.
Strength of the economy, because indeed the US is quite a strong economy with a lot of power and a lot of people buying, but how independent it is, because nowadays you have a global economy and import products from all over the world, and the US has always been a huge market when it comes to imports. So they are now cutting back on that. And like I said, I understand where it comes from, and it does come from a good place. But how independent are they truly, and how much backlash is going to have from stumping this international trade?
Well, I think that the thing is, if for example, I don't know, you import a certain product. Now you're saying, okay, well, America's now going to make that product so that they're selling it, not that we're not relying on imports. Is the structure then in place? Have they built the factories? Have they got the right raw materials there that they need? Have they got government grants to set those up? Then you've got the job create. It takes time to do all that. So, as I said, maybe that we might see in the future a stronger US economy because of that. It's just what's the timeline on that? And then what's the timeline of that compared to your move to Portugal? You know, if we're talking, I don't know, if that takes 5-10 years to do and you're moving in the next 6 months or 12 months, then you may see a weaker US dollar in the timeframes that you're talking about. As I said, no one's got a crystal ball, but what we are seeing is, and what I said before, is that there is a lot of volatility around sort of Trump's first term and certainly probably first couple of years. And how is that going to impact the cost of your euros? And we're just helping people to navigate that, really.
Yes. And is there costs to making this kind of, this reserve, this 10% deposit? Does it have any extra costs, or it's just the normal fees?
No, there's no extra cost. There's no cost to hold the euros. There's no cost to be able to buy the euros in advance. The only way we make our money is on the exchange rate. So it's the same service that we offer all customers and everything that we do. It's just that we've got different options available. And it's really, that's our service is all about. How do we make it cheaper from, say, against your bank? But how can we help either make it cheaper or, as I said, not make it more expensive, that things might not become affordable. I mean, as you know, I've moved to Portugal myself, and it is challenging. Every month, if you're moving money or what you think you'll spend on certain things, the budget for moving it does go up. So it's about that you try and manage the costs, and if we can save a client money within the exchange rate, then it will help to the cost that you have of your move generally when it comes to visas. If you are sending your goods, like a removal company, lawyers' fees, whatever, it does add up, and it's just making that move as affordable as possible and less stressful.
Yes, I do think that that's often one of the biggest mistakes that people make with currency, is like leaving everything for the last minute, or just leave it as a kind of a background thought, like I do it when I'll do it. And then they can be facing a number of issues, like the conversion going down, or even when it comes to time frames, because when you are making this kind of big transactions, they are generally not going to happen from one day to the other, just moving money international for high amounts. And this is actually something that my clients get stuck on fairly often, is when they do this, when they leave this payment for the last minute, especially when they try to do it directly with the banks, there is often a lot of bureaucracy they have to go through, and they end up being stuck and not being able to move their money when they want to, on top of having a number of fees on top. So how do you recommend managing this kind of situations? How early do you think it's feasible? Personally, also from your experience, how have you been managing this kind of daily expenses? Did you put kind of a budget aside and use it for a few months, or are you working also on a more monthly transaction basis?
I think that certainly from what you were saying about the bank, what's interesting is that we are in a world where we are used to things happening quicker. And the challenge then is like, oh, that's not very quick anymore. And it's surprising, but as I said, we can't change the bureaucracy of banking. Even in America, it's much more antiquated. It's much more old school than we expect it to be. And then obviously the Portuguese banking system as well. And when we're talking about larger sums of money, you're right, people normally encounter more issues because there's compliance. There's more authorization needed. And that's where people can be caught out because the banks flagged the payment, they've held the payment for more information, or they're here in Portugal and the bank needs them to sign a form or more authorization because they're sending larger sums. They need them to be there in branch and you're not there. So it things like that I would say that people need to be starting to think about this before they move to Portugal. What do they need to put into place? And we're not talking about, we've talked about the exchange, I'm talking about processes. Do they need to sign any form? Will their bank make an international payment? How easy is that? Do they need an international card reader? What process do you need to put in place to make sure that you can move your money when you're not there? And then when you're here, again, obviously I say think about it in advance because of the exchange rate movements. But if you were leaving it more to the last minute, I would probably say if you were given a deadline, I would look into at least 2 weeks before, because the banks can take about a week to transfer the money anyway. But then you're talking, as I said, about a hold up, maybe even a couple of weeks, I would say, if you're using your bank just to be safe. I mean, I had a client that you tried to use their bank, 2 weeks, nothing. The bank flagged the payment. It took ages. So that's the sort of challenges you find with your bank,
In
which can
general,
be
the
more
bigger the
stressful.
payment, the more likely it is to have problems. Because, for example, here in Portugal, we have the capital laundry policies that have to be followed in big payments, and then they often request a lot of information to prove that the money is coming from a clean source and that kind of thing. One of my developer clients had 4 million held up for months.
Exactly. So that's why, a lot of clients come to us with problems, and that gets a little bit more challenging because there's only so much we can do. We can't talk to the bank on your behalf in that instance because we weren't involved in the process and it's
And
your
that's
money. And of course, they
generally, you
won't talk to us.
cannot talk to the bank on behalf in general. That's actually a big thing. Like most of my investor clients, they have lawyers with lawyer power of attorney letters and so on. And even so, there's a lot of banks that don't accept that, and you have to give specific forms to the lawyers that are approved by the bank, and the general power of attorney doesn't work. So it can definitely be a pain. So the best way to avoid it, I would say, is to probably start looking into this kind of things when you start the move, like 1, 2, 3 months ahead, or even earlier if you can afford, because like we are saying, we probably will have a bit of money held up on this. So it of course depends on the budget that the person has available. But the sooner you get your money converted into a Portuguese bank account, the easier your transactions will be, because then you won't have to worry about all these bureaucracies and flaggings and so on.
We have clients who will transfer money and hold it with us for a deposit, and they haven't found a house yet. And they say it's because when we find one, we're ready. The money's there. Now, not everybody is like that, but some will do it like that. And the thing is, with us being involved in the process, we've got the money, it's here, so we haven't got to worry about it coming from, say, America. But again, different banks, we know their processes. Then we send the money, and if the bank does flag the payment, what it does is it then talks to where the money's come from. So if it was your bank in America, it would send a message to your American bank and ask for that information. Now, again, obviously that's a slow process. How quickly your bank then responds to them, then that dictates a little bit the time that it will take to release. Whereas if it comes from us, the bank's then contacting us because we're the ones that have sent the money. We have all the compliance up front, so we talk quite quickly with the beneficiary bank. So it is a little, we can talk to the bank in that sense because we are the ones that are sending the money. So it helps a little bit, and we can send the payments very quickly. We also have extra tracking on the payment, so we know exactly where the payment is at all times. Gives a bit of reassurance to people, especially on the larger amounts. But also it means we can tell you when it's in the beneficiary bank account. So if it's your own account, if it's a third party, so if you're sending it to a seller, you can say, look, we know it's in your account. So again, that's extra sort of peace of mind.
Yeah, I think that's definitely very positive, and definitely something people should have more foresight about, because it can definitely cause significant delays and headaches.
I think what's nice is that, again, obviously GDPR, we only share information with the client's authorization. But what's nice is to then work as a sort of team of, you've got your real estate broker or buyer's agent, you've got your lawyer, we're here, and we all talk together, and that helps, I think, as well. That then if there's problems or you need confirmations or anything like that, everyone's sort of in the loop of where the money is or anything that's needed.
So how does this process work? If someone wanted to secure their money for their house right now before things start, so they would go in contact with you, and we will have the contact details here so people can reach out. And how does you process things? How long does it take? What are the steps that are usually there from your end?
Have a free consultation with us. So it doesn't cost anything to have a chat with us. Please do that, so at least we can get to know you and find out your situation. The next steps would be to open an account with us. It's completely free, but it is very similar to having a bank account. So there's obviously application form, some paperwork. So we get the account open, and then depending on what you need to do, then we may need some, as we sort of talked about, compliance documentation. It's not just for us, it's for the process. And as I said, it's so that we're prepared for any questions that we get asked from a money laundering perspective from the banks. So again, if it's property, then we'll ask for obviously the signed documents or whatever is needed. If you haven't got any, if you've not found a house yet and you just open the account, then it's probably quite straightforward. Once the account's open, again, as I said, we get to know you, we get to know your situation. At that point, you can go ahead and start buying euros. We hold the money on account for you free of charge. Or depending on your time frames, we just keep in touch with you. We keep you up to date with what's happening with the markets. You keep us up to date with your move. And then we work with you together as part of the team. You know, you've got, as I said, someone for your visa. You're talking to a buyer's agent or estate agent. You're talking to a lawyer. We're just sort of part of that team, really, to be fair. If it is super early for people, we've got a moving money guide that you can request a copy of. As I said, I think probably in the very early stages, if it's not necessarily to secure the rate, it's having the conversation so that who are you banking with? Is it easy to move money from that account? Because some clients bank with certain banks where they don't make an international payment, they make it a little bit harder. And what they've done is they've opened an account with a different bank, moved their money. And again, it's things like that you've got more time to do before you move.
Yes, but overall, from what is the normal time frame, let's say from them contacting you until they have euros available? I know it depends, of course, in the situation.
It depends on, yeah. I think if best case, if somebody contacted me, well, today's different because it's a Friday, so obviously we've got the weekend coming up. But say it was a Monday and you contacted me first thing on the Monday and we get that account open on the Monday. If you sent us the money and it arrived overnight, say Tuesday morning, if you can actually agree the rate with us, buy the euros before sending us money. So if you open the account on Monday, you could secure the rate, buy your euros, then you send us your money, and then once we receive your money, we'll have the euros in the account, and then we can hold them. Or you might have instructed us to, as soon as they come in and we exchange, we've got the euros, we can send it straight onto the account that you specify. So you can secure the rate before you've sent us money.
Okay, so overall, it's a pretty simple process. There can, of course, be hurdles and delays with the bank, especially on bigger amounts of money. But it's something that if there are no issues and everything is ready, can be done from one day to another, which is, of course, fairly positive. And it will, like I said, depend on the readiness of the bank to send the money over. Sometimes international transfers can take a while, and I've experienced that. Depends on how modernized the bank is. But I think that's something people may be concerned about, because nowadays there is a lot of automated services, you know, like TransferWise and Revolut. And I do use Revolut for, you know, daily transactions when I'm on a trip and so on, because it's very practical. But personally, I would not for big transactions, because their customer service is terrible, to be honest. And one of the reasons that I think it's important to work with a more personalized approach like yours in this kind of situations where there's a lot of money being moved, and even for your own peace of mind, you want to know what's going on and have someone actually answering you on the other side. I think it's very important to have your kind of service. And in reality, the cost of it is it's not different, is it?
Yeah, we offer competitive rates of exchange. So the service that we offer is a bonus, an added value to what we're offering. When you're talking about those other companies, we had a client that came to us and she'd used one of those. And talking about the banks flagging payments and talking to each other. So what had happened was that she sent their money through them. They have an intermediary bank, which is JP Morgan. So the money goes to JP Morgan and then on to the Portuguese bank. So the Portuguese bank had flagged the payment. So they then had talked back to JP Morgan because that's where the money had technically for them had come from. And then she contacted the company because where is the money? So it got sort of stuck in the middle. Eventually, they did manage to sort of talk to each other. The problem was, because it's pretty much an online company, they have a policy of whenever you contact them, we'll get back to you in 5 working days.
That's nice. In my case, it was like 30. Because, for example, I had a situation where I had a deposit payment that was supposedly returned but never came back. And I made the complaint and so on. They were actually fast replying on that first contact. But then they have like a 45 business days to actually resolve the problem. I ended up only getting my money back 6 months later.
Wow. Wow.
And that was $500. Thankfully for me, it's not that huge of a deal. But if it was a transaction for a house, it would have been a nightmare.
Yes. Well, that's the thing where we've seen clients come to us and they've done some money through and they haven't heard anything, and haven't heard as long as that, but 2 weeks or more, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And then they've fortunately had more money. So they've still managed to use us, put the deposit down and carry on. And eventually they get their money back from the online company. But what happens if you don't? Yeah. What happens if it is the balance payment? It's a lot of money that you can't then find. And as you said, if in your case it is going to be something like 45, the problem, as I said, is that just them getting back to customers is like 5 working days, then to resolve it and another contact, it pushes on. So yeah, you're talking about maybe a month or more.
And often this process are often like automated and put into AI algorithms and so on. In my case, what happened is that I don't know exactly why, but the algorithm decided that my process was closed. And because I didn't notice that they sent me an email saying they were closing my process, I only noticed after the time spent, there was like a week period that I could go back to them and say, no, this is not resolved. And I didn't notice in that period. So the whole thing restarted and the deadlines all restarted. So it was really a nightmare.
Gosh. As I said, it's the thing is, when it works, obviously a lot of people I know have used some of the online companies and it's worked perfectly fine. But the problem is, if there's any problems, contacting someone is hard. And as we said, when you're talking about larger sums of money, it's stressful enough as it is, but it's a real worry. Where is my money? It's a lot of money that's gone perhaps missing, or is a challenge. The other thing as well is that when you do it online, you have to put the IBAN in yourself. I mean, I'm quite capable, put an IBAN in. It's a long number. I look at it, I look at it again, I think, have I got enough zeros in there? It's a real stress, and they're only sending a small amount of money. So we always ring and check the beneficiary. We call them to make sure it's correct so that there's no human error or there's any fraud. And as I said, I call Steve, he's my dealer, and he just does it for me. And you know what? It's just wonderful because moving country is very stressful. There were so many elements and things I had to do. I had to move house in the UK first, then move abroad. I was trying to apply for my visa. I was very stressed about that. It's just one less hassle. You ring up and somebody does it for you. I like that in a lot of elements of my life, especially when you come to move.
Yeah, so I think in these big processes like moving to another country, it can make the whole world of difference to work with experts and to have actually sometimes just some hand holding, because it's just so stressful. It's just such a big change. So many things are going to happen. And no matter how prepared you are, there are always going to be culture shocks. And there are always going to be some things that don't go as well as you hoped. And so the more support you have, I think the better. And
Yes. And I find that, I mean, not to sort of go down that rabbit hole, but I know that people will say, oh, we go on the Facebook groups and we ask, the challenge is I've been on them and it's just so overwhelming. There's so much information or questions. But everybody's situation is different. So that's what makes that challenging, really, is that you could read what somebody posts or replies to your question, but what's their situation? It could be completely different for you. There could be different elements. They've done it in a different time. The visa process might have changed. The exchange rates are different. This is different. There's lots of, they bank with a different bank. There's
honestly,
loads of things that might have been different for them.
when I started this company 4 years ago, I was present in a lot of those groups, just talking to people and recommending things and so on. And at some point, I completely gave up. I just got out of all of them because there's just so much bad information and so much things just happening. And a lot of them are advertisement. A lot of them are questions that really shouldn't be asked there. There's a lot of bad answers. It's just at some point, I just completely gave up just being there. Even I'm not even the one moving.
Yeah. And the thing is, for me, I wanted to do it right because it was so important that, I get here, I get my visa, and that is the end goal, is to get a property, whether it be rental or you're buying, and you're buying a good property. You need somebody who's reliable, like your company, like yourself, to make sure that, the properties that you're renting or buying are suitable. And then, as I said, making sure things are not going to cost you a little bit more, and just get here. That's the end goal, really. And that by maybe, some of these sort of false information, potentially, or as we said, the holdups with the banking or with an online provider,
Sometimes
it
it's
puts
just
all that
bad.
at risk. It puts all that at risk, essentially.
Yeah, sometimes it's just bad luck, and doing some preventive action can change a lot. And overall, in that sense, I would say two advice. The first one is definitely be prepared whenever you can. So whatever you can, try to get sorted earlier, get it sorted earlier. And I think one thing that really applies in this kind of situation is that cheaper can often be more expensive. When you try to save by not getting help, not paying certain services, and so on, often that ends up to much bigger expenses later on because you didn't have the whole information and ended up not making such a good purchase or decision or exchange or whatever the situation applies.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen clients that have been in that situation, and it's taken them longer to get here, and the process has been perhaps more expensive. A lot of customers that I speak to now, that I meet when I'm living here, I meet other expats, and the things they say, what I wish I knew. I mean, obviously it's great in hindsight with everything, but generally it is, they said, they investigate about taxes, but they don't do that enough. Taxes and moving money are the things that they didn't look into enough when they first moved.
Yes, I think that's a very big concern, and we're actually going to have a webinar in May. I think it's the 17th. I don't remember the exact date now, but we will announce it later about exactly tax and financial implications with a financial specialist that we work with. And these are one of those things that they are just so particular. It depends so much on your own situation, where your income is coming from, how much your income is, what your country is. There is no generalized, or there is very little generalized advice in this kind of things because there are so many rules that apply to different people in different scenarios. So it can definitely be complex. And I think one of the big things that people are concerned about is the taxation, the difference between the taxation in their own country and how they will be taxed in Portugal. And there are some baselines, but there's just so much things that depend on your own income and sources.
Exactly. So I think it is worth looking at using experts throughout the process for the various different sort of sections that you need to move. And this, for me, I think is one that gets overlooked, and that they should be sort of thinking it in line with everything else.
And what you just talked about, that is such a common thing. You know, people often come to us after they had the problem. So you say, like, after it blew up on their face, they come like, oh, damn, I need help now. And then, of course, we do our best to help them, but they probably already had an expense that was quite significant thanks to that mistake. So I would advise just get help from the start.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I know. But yeah, please. I mean, it's free to have a conversation. So just at least do that is what I would say.
We also have free calls, so that's for both of us. We on my end, we are relocations. We help a lot with locations and choosing the property. We kind of help in the whole process, and we've been partnering with Spartan for quite a while, exactly because we find it very important to actually have a human helping on the other side. And our feedback from Spartan has been very good from our clients on how helpful you guys are. So I really hope that we can, and I believe that we will still keep contributing to helping people reach Portugal in the best way possible.
Absolutely. That is the goal.
Yes. So I don't know if there is anything else that you think would be important to talk about. I think we covered quite a bit already.
I think we've covered everything. As I said, it's just getting people, if anything, thinking about this early and not just thinking about the price of the euros in relation to, say, your bank or the provider. It's starting to think about the other elements that we really spend most of our time talking about, and it's really sort of the processes and the transfer and the speed of transfer and just making sure that you hit your deadlines and things like that.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today, Sarah. And let's see how
No
things
problem.
evolve. Things are it's affects very significantly the US people, these exchanges, like we were saying. So let's see if they go up or down in the next few weeks.
Yes, let's talk again and then see what my predictions. Maybe I need to be putting the lottery on. But no, ultimately, anything I can do to help people move to Portugal or any country, but certainly I'm a little bit biased because I've moved to Portugal myself. Then can't recommend it enough.
So yeah, great talking to you this today, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Excellent. Bye, everyone.